Good. Right, we will go back into the final part then, which is just a bit of a Q&A session, but also a bit of a summary from the last piece. So can we go to, well, let's start with breakout session 1. Alex, do you want to give a short summary back in terms of topics discussed?
Yeah, so I think that in the short time that we had available, there was 2 or 3 sort of key things that came through quite clearly. I think one, and it's important we stress this, I guess, is that in Scotland we do have, even though it's not the biggest, we have an established supply chain when it comes to the different components we're going to need to decarbonise our fleets. As Ewan highlighted, and Wayne, who's here today from Electron Garage, are working very closely with different component suppliers. So I think when we think about how we do that within Scotland, shortening our supply chains, then a number of the parts of the jigsaw that we need are already in place. And I think we should be kind of reassured by that and continue to support that. I think also kind of builds on a recognition that in terms of this fleet transition, it's not necessarily all going to be about procurement of brand new EVs. That retrofitting has an important place to play as well. And again, we've got a few people here today who are operating in that space. And I think there's more, I think what we're finding and hearing in our group is that more support for retrofitting is needed in terms of, from a policy standpoint. So I think that's important also. And we briefly touched on skills and trying to understand where the skills gaps are and how we can address them as well. And although we didn't have time to explore that in too much detail, I think what's coming out really loud and clear is that the skills that we need in the future, and so all the businesses aren't just technical skills, they're right across the kind of spectrum. And that, Transport Scotland, have been leading that sort of skills programme, but a lot more kind of focus is needed on that, and working in engagement with all of you to make sure that we're clearly quantifying, qualifying the skills development programmes that we're going to need. So I think that was the kind of key aspects that came through. I think just broadly, there was some good connections made in the group as well, because knowledge share is as much as anything about what this type of session's about. So I think that was an important outcome as well. So I think that's very top line, Stuart. That's kind of what we covered off.
Yeah. Thanks, Alex. Catherine, I understand you've got a couple of points.
Sorry, I was muted there. Some of the headline points that came out of our session, one of the main ones was training. So Fergus raised a great point that actually, while it's sometimes seen that there's not actually driver training that's needed, actually that can be important to get the maximum range out of the vans. And I think that kind of came onto another point that was great about, the range on vans is not currently that high. And I wonder if there's any solutions providers out there that can talk about whether that's something that they're looking at for them in the future.
That's good. Have we lost you? I think we've lost her. Okay, I think from there then we're hearing that there's training that's required throughout. I think we've got a couple of people on here actually at the moment. Andrew, I see your hand raised. Did you want to make a comment?
Yes. Am I unmuted? I hope I am.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay. I mean, one of the pieces of learning that we have gathered from the last couple of years is that items like correct tire pressure can have an enormous effect on EV range. Not only that, obviously, but also on particle matter from tire wear and all those kind of other horrible things, given that EVs are generally heavier than their ICE counterparts. But that's certainly in terms of training for EV fleet operators, maintaining the optimal tire pressure must be up there on the list, I think.
Yeah, Thanks. Yeah, that's a very good point.
And in terms of the effect on range, it's quite marked.
Does anyone from does Rachel? Do you want to come in on that one, or Karen? Do you want to say anything on that front?
Hi, Stuart.
Yes, hi.
Sorry, specifically on driver behaviour.
On drivers, yeah, and understanding EVs.
Yeah, it's not something that we've looked at so far. I mean, we kind of tend to look more at the technical side of skills and what's required, but it's definitely probably something that's needed. And whether the colleges would be the place to get that or somewhere else, I'm not sure yet, but yeah, it's probably worth considering.
Okay, we've also got Rosalind here from the Highland Council on the line. Rosalind, I guess from a council perspective, when companies are looking at using the charging infrastructure, is there anything that you think they should be factoring in before they're looking at using that charging infrastructure, such as things like driver training and making sure they look after their vehicles?
Yes, thanks for that, Stuart. Definitely. So we have been developing the public network in the Highlands, and there is a good spread of charge points around. But I suppose it's important to understand what your specific needs are and almost mapping that out. So there's a range of rapid and destination charge points, but I suppose that's there to support the public, the wider public. And I suppose when looking at your fleet, you should be considering where you plan to charge that. I think it's important. We use telematics within our fleet, which is a really beneficial way of seeing what way you use your fleet and the typical routes and typical mileage. And I think that's really beneficial to bear in mind. Also, in terms of driver training, all the telematics almost helps to highlight where those inefficiencies are in terms of driving and where you could make improvements or focus training with your drivers. So I think that's a really important thing to consider. And I suppose also with regards to charging infrastructure, having early discussions with the DNO is also really good, as they can help with designing, I suppose, your infrastructure for your fleet, and perhaps like optimizing your current connection that you already have, and by using smart load management, or not necessarily increasing your connection straight away, but using charge points at an off-peak time, for example, overnight, may be possible on your current connection.
Great, and I think you operate over 700 vehicles, don't you? So it's I guess you've been through that in terms of understanding a lot from the driver use side, as well as thinking about what that means when you transition from one vehicle to another.
Yes, that's right. And we're approximately 8% of the 700 vehicles in the light fleet are transitioned over to electric or hybrid at the moment. And we're just at the stage of understanding where to position our charge points for the fleet, so that you get them in the right place, so that it works for your staff in terms of charging. And also, we have been utilising the car club scheme, and that has helped reduce the grey mileage within the council. And when that was rolled out a few years ago, there was quite extensive training and workshops with the drivers to help them understand how to use the vehicles and use them effectively, I suppose.
Sorry, Rosalind, I just want to jump in there. So you're using Car Club to offset the need for the vehicles? Is that what you were saying?
So the Car Club was to offset the use of grey fleet within the council. So there's currently, I think, approximately 50 vehicles which are used by staff rather than using their personal vehicle and charging expenses. And so they are hybrid vehicles. And at the moment, we're looking at the idea of progressing that over to electric vehicles, ideally in the future. But again, it's that infrastructure which needs to be there to support the vehicles.
So that's a lot of actually operational thinking about how people use it, where they charge it, is that at home or not, and actually is there a better way of doing it by using car club fleets? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. And Car Club, it has a lot of benefits, very easy to use, and we used Enterprise helped launch the scheme, and they provided training and great support for rolling out the Car Club, and they're all over the Highlands in different locations, so staff were able to utilize that based in different places in the Highlands.
Thanks for your contribution. We've got Karen Gibson from Dundee and Angus College on because of some of the work that they're doing at the moment with talking to businesses about some of their leaders and technical needs and skills needs. And actually, I think one of the things that's come up is a bit more of that wider systems thinking. Do you want to cover off some points on that, Karen? And what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I guess. So I'm the business partnership manager at Dundee and Angus College, for those who I haven't met. I guess right now we are working hard to try and make sure that the college is providing a skills provision for all businesses as we transition. And that's really looking at the short and the long term. The short term being is how do we support you to upskill your current workforces and help try and fix some of those skills gaps that are emerging, and the long term being how do we start to embed that learning into our core curriculum so that we're teaching that future generation workforce those skills that are needed. What we're doing at the moment, we've set up an electric vehicle training school where we do teach the sort of the technical skills, so the IMI level ones, which is your sort of general awareness raising for your drivers, your valeters, your salespeople who need to understand electric vehicles, up to your level 3 and upskilling your technicians. I guess my job at the college is to work with industries to better understand what their skills gaps are, what their challenges are. And the more time I spend with businesses, the more I guess I'm learning of the much wider skills gaps that are being created because of this transition. So I think we talk a lot about the technical skills gaps that are there in the training that's required, but actually a lot of the problems right now is recruitment, it's leadership, it's procurement, and there's a huge lack of understanding, I guess, what this transition actually means and how people can start buying decisions. So I guess what we've put together is an industry group to try and help us better understand what some of those challenges are that you're facing, so that we could make sure we're creating a curriculum and a training offer that is absolutely led for you guys, by you guys, for you guys. And so, yeah, we're working hard at the moment with businesses, creating that portfolio and trying to make sure that we're not just covering off the technical skill, but that much wider skills gaps that's being created as well. So I'm just really keen to continue to learn from businesses. And if anybody fancies a catch up, tell me a little bit more about maybe some of the challenges you're facing, to help me better understand how we could position the college as a key training provider to support you guys. I'd be really keen to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. I think it's interesting to hear actually throughout this call about the move away from the upfront cost to the whole life cost, to thinking through the cost of potentially retrofitting, the road tax implications, and other incentive schemes, and actually having a broader understanding of the wider costs that are being faced. I guess from a procurement standpoint, therefore, it becomes a much more of a different beast compared to just buying a diesel vehicle, if you like. And I was going to say, I think Karen Geeky from our side at Transport Scotland, when looking at some other types of vehicle types, like heavy goods vehicles, suddenly there's wider implications on depots and charging. Karen, do you want to just come in on that point? And then I will give the floor. I see there are a couple of hands raised, and then we'll go from there. But Karen, do you want to just come in on the wider, some of the other operational factors you're seeing?
So certainly in terms of heavy goods vehicles, I'm very much aware that depots might not always be owned, they might be leased, which provides an extra layer of complexity for those looking to transition their vehicles to one kind of zero emission fuel or another. When it comes to the very heavy vehicles, there's much more technological uncertainty. I know that people on this call said very clearly, and I've heard very clearly previously, that battery electric is absolutely the way forward for vans, certainly as far as we can see at the moment. But when it comes to the heavy end of the vehicles, particularly the 44 tons, the long distance, then hydrogen's very much going to be part of the mix as far as we can see. And that will in itself bring a whole raft of additional issues, insurance issues, understanding how you put the refueling infrastructure in. So I think in heavy duty vehicle world, we're still at a much earlier stage than you are with light commercial vehicles. I think I'm now able to say that we'll be shortly drawing together industry leaders to look at, really identifying and tackling those challenges and developing a shared understanding across operators, across finance and across the energy sector to understand how we tackle these issues and move them on to a better place. Happy to answer any questions on that. I'll put my email in the chat.
Thanks, Karen. Steve, and so I was going to call you Steve. I'll call you Stephen.
Sorry, I've been called worse. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Yeah, one of the points I wanted to make was about, if you have an electric commercial vehicle, and Fergus might know this. I used to work for a company called Smith Electric Vehicles, and we converted transit vans to electric power. So we're very much aware of the limitations surrounding range and duty cycle. So as the payload goes up on these vans, then you need to be aware of how much that impacts in range as well. And I'm sure Fergus will be well schemed in advising these clients and how that can impact. I mean, the same goes for your passenger cars as well. How much kit are you carrying? How many people are you carrying? It all impacts on how far the vehicle will go. Equally, so will inclement weather. So winter, when you've got lights, wipers, heaters going, all that starts to impact on how far an electric vehicle can go. One of the reasons we started our company was primarily to look at fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cell conversions for commercial vehicles aimed at 3.5 tonne and above, because we understand that the range limitations and the duty cycle limitations that pure EV can impose on a commercial fleet. Part of what our model was to deploy a refueling station into depots. That's why we were focused on depot-based fleets, so that you start to eliminate the issues with the lack of infrastructure for hydrogen refueling, because I think there's only 3 or 4 stations in Scotland at the moment. And what you start to do by putting a hydrogen refueling station into a depot is you start to increase the network for refueling for hydrogen around the country. I know Glasgow City Council, I think in the Palmadie depot, they're installing one and they're going to make that publicly available to anyone who has a hydrogen vehicle. So there's a model there. The problem with hydrogen fuel cell conversions is they're really expensive. Where an EV conversion could be anywhere between 20 and 50 grand, then you're looking at least double, maybe triple that for doing a fuel cell conversion. But that will give you not only your payload back, but also your duty cycle back, because fuel cell vehicles tend to travel a lot further than pure electric vehicles as well. So I just wanted to point that out. The other thing about pure EVs is that you can add a fuel cell range extender, but again, that depends on having a hydrogen refueling station accessible for you on your fleet. So I just wanted to make everyone aware of that if they weren't already. That although hydrogen is coming along, it's probably more suited to heavier vehicles than it is to lighter vehicles. But the main issues with it are the cost and the lack of infrastructure at the moment.
It's probably worth coming back in from our side. Thanks for that input, Stephen. That we are looking at hydrogen and skills for the future in terms of both handling the gas, working with other colleagues in our energy sector, but also thinking about, with regard to vehicles as well. David, you've got your hand up. I'm happy to take this, and then I was to say I'm conscious we're running over on time. And Catherine, you may have something further to share as well.
I was hoping somebody was looking somewhere about the the recharge sort of mechanism for drivers. It varies. I've just Googled something here, but it varies from 5.8p for the cost of driving up to 23 pence, depending where you're charging. Business won't tolerate that. That's a complete nightmare to try and work its way through. So all your hopes and ambitions will go down the pan if government don't get this right, because it will not be possible for businesses to have that level of flex. Imagine turning up at a petrol station, it might be 70p or it might be £3.70p. It just doesn't work. So we've got to find a way of allowing businesses easily and conveniently to pay their staff the cost of driving, or it's going to be a complete car crash, if you pardon the pun.
Okay, thank you for the final input. Catherine, back to you.
That's kind of covered off anything that came up in our breakout session. There was only one kind of other question, which was regarding managing finances between personal and business usage of a company car, and kind of how do you work out the electricity of home charging and kind of car mileage if you need to use it for a business purpose. Oh, you're on mute, Stuart.
Just wondered if Catherine, have you frozen?
Oh, have I? Am I back?
Oh, you're back. You've frozen on my screen.
Sorry.
I don't know.
Yeah, sorry. It was just a question around managing finance between personal and business usage of a company car. That was a kind of the only other thing that could come out in our breakout session.
Okay. Is there right? So I think hopefully from that event we've heard quite a lot in terms of the different skills gaps that we have. We know that there's a few different courses and people looking at the space where the skills gaps. We recognise that there's quite a lot of regulatory issues that still need to be fixed in order for us to transition fully. But hopefully you found this session useful and you made some good connections between yourselves as well. But we'll be following up with the slides, and we may put a few questions in as well following this. So thank you all.